We are fortunate to have here today Stephen Holl from Holl Architects, New York City, visiting us today here in Manchester. Stephen, when and where were you born?
I was born December 9th, 1947, and was here in Manchester, of course Harrison Memorial Hospital, but my first days of my life were spent right here on the beach in Manchester, in a house, right on the beach, not far from where we have a house now, like 100 feet away. So my first experience is really, as an infant, listening to the waves, which to this day, it's the easiest place for me to sleep is when I'm in the cabin here in Manchester and I can hear those waves and feel that salt air, which I really love. Mm-hmm. And I grew up here and in Bremerton, but we always came back here. So I remember as a child fishing with my dad, fishing for salmon on the bay and beach fires, here, and playing on the beach, and just growing up as a teenager, bringing my hot rod car out and having beach fires and a lot of singing and women and wonderful times. And then going to the University of Washington to study architecture, but also coming home here and always being connected to Manchester.
Okay. And you went to the University of Washington?
I graduated from the University of Washington in 1971. I spent a year in Rome studying, lived behind the Pantheon in Rome. So I was a very dedicated architecture student, and spent my time in Italy, which kind of changed my whole life in the sense that I had this European desire. So after the University of Washington, I went to San Francisco to do an internship, working for Lawrence Halpern. And then I decided to go back to graduate school, and I went to the Architecture Association in London for a year, 1976. And after the Architecture Association, my brother's an artist and he was in New York. I went back to San Francisco for a little while and I decided it was too small and I needed to be in New York City. And I went to New York City on New Year's Eve, 1976-77, on an excursion ticket from San Francisco, and never took the return half. Never went back to San Francisco. So
and you opened up an office.
I opened up an office with no work and struggled for years teaching. I taught at Parsons School of Design, Pratt School of Architecture, and Columbia University, where I'm still now a tenured professor, and struggled with small commissions, over the years, 1 and 2 people in my office helping me, and spending most of my time as a teacher, and slowly winning awards and building up the practice, and finally, winning a big competition in Helsinki for the Kiasma Museum, the Museum of Contemporary Art in Helsinki in 1993, which, then I had to have an office of 6 or 7, and from that time on, I won competitions, and my office just grew to up to 64 at one point. And then I brought it back down, now it's about 42. And but over the years, I always came back to Manchester, at least 2 times, sometimes 3 or 4 times a year, and connected with my mom and dad here. My mom, who passed away last December, and my dad, who's 90 years old and still lives in the first house I ever designed, right there on the beach.
Mm-hmm. And I understand you have an office in Beijing too, and you have a project there that's quite famous, adjacent to the Forbidden City.
I have an office in Beijing. We were invited there in 2003 to do a gigantic project with 8 skyscrapers, 22 stories tall. It's called Linked Hybrid, and it's connected by bridges, and it creates a big public space in the center with water gardens, Montessori school, kindergarten, a cinematheque that kind of floats on its own reflection in the water gardens. And that project was so large that it caused me to have to open an office in Beijing, something I never set out to do. And then we got another project we actually had a project in Nanjing already for a small museum, which now is just opening this year. It's been under construction for 4 years. And then we got another project in Shenzhen for a project called Horizontal Skyscraper, which is even larger and more radical, and that was completed last year, and it's been winning awards and been in the New York Times and various newspapers. So the whole adventure, I sort of backed into it. I never really went there as an entrepreneur, but we were invited to do some things, and one thing led to another. So now I have an office in Beijing, which I'm still maintaining. We have a project under construction in Chengdu, which is 4 million square feet, a big public space like Water Polo Center in New York, water gardens and public space. So my idea of working in China was really to try to make a contribution, to make the buildings make public space, which they really lack, to do super green buildings with geothermal wells and recycled water, and to make hybrid buildings, which means they're part of an urban fabric. They all have living, working, culture, recreation, and commerce, all in one project. And I've been able to do that in 4 different places now. So those have been good contributions to the basic urban structure.
Wow, that's very interesting. I heard you were in Eastern Europe as well.
I did a lot of things in Scandinavia. After we won the competition in Helsinki, we realized that building opened in 1998. And then I did, parallel to that, the Nyhamsen Center in Tonsberg in Hamarøy, Norway, which was a project that I designed in 1996 and it finally opened last year. So it was like 15, 16 years between the time it was first drawn and the time it was finally realized. And it won a lot of different awards. And it's been a very interesting project, north of the Arctic Circle, 200 miles north of the Arctic Circle. And we just, the year 2009, we opened the Herning Museum of Art in the middle of Denmark, in a small town called Herning, on the Great Peninsula of Denmark, about 30 minutes by plane away from Copenhagen. And we recently won a big project in Copenhagen, which we're waiting to see whether it's going to go forward or not. A kind of harbor gateway, 2 skyscrapers connected by a bridge that spans 160 meters over the harbor, the entrance to the harbor, the old harbor of Copenhagen. So there's been some great things to do in Scandinavia. We just opened a museum in Biarritz in the south of France, Museum of Surf and the Ocean. And that just opened on the 25th of June. And that was also a competition. Most all the projects that I've been able to do have been competitions that we've won. Mm-hmm. So that's been a very fortunate and exciting time.
Wow, and then domestically you've been busy too as well, I understand.
We did the Nelson Atkins Museum in Kansas City, and here in Seattle we did the Chapel of St. Ignatius, which I'm very proud of, that you can go visit. It's always open at Seattle University, right in the center of Seattle University campus. It's only 6,000 square feet, but it's really well detailed, and I'm very proud of that building, and they keep it up perfectly. And we also did the Bellevue Art Museum, and opened in 2001. So, but now we're doing the College of Art and Art History in University of Iowa, and we also have a new project for the Institute of Contemporary Arts at Virginia Commonwealth University, and a new project for the Academic Center in Haverford, Pennsylvania. So yeah, it's a good moment now to have academic projects. And we built the big dormitory at MIT that opened in 2000, which on Vassar Street, which is a project I'm very proud of that won a lot of awards. So I've had a good chance at doing university and campus work, which I'm very fond of. I really appreciate doing work that has, a public space dimension and a social dimension. It can kind of contribute something back via great architecture. So that's been an exciting thing. But a lot of things I've drawn right here in Manchester on my little sketchboard. I'll come home and work a couple of weeks in the summertime and make my little watercolors and be working on a big, huge project right on the beach.
I see you have an office in Manchester.
Well, it's a tiny desk, it's a couple of drawing boards.
But you advertise that you have an office here.
Do I?
I believe I've seen, I've Googled Stephen Holl Architects, and I've found that you do have an address off of Beach Drive.
Well, that's the cabin.
Oh, that's the cabin.
The cabin on Beach Drive.
That's good. Do you visualize, you've got a tremendous amount of momentum going now. Do you visualize starting to slow down, or are you going to keep the same momentum, or?
I don't have a plan. One of the things about architecture is you don't really know what's going to happen in the next phase. It's like you enter a competition and you may win, or you may, chances are you won't. And we entered 10 competitions last year, I think, and we won 5 of them. So,
That's very
not
good.
a, you know, some of them don't go forward for political reasons, but you know, while that goes on, you don't really.
Well, it's very exciting. You
Yeah.
don't particularly want to end that type of momentum when it's
Right.
going your way.
Right. You don't really envision just slowing down, and you know, although I enjoy coming.
Let's say
out here
20
and-
years from now, or 15, or whatever, at some point, do you visualize yourself retiring here in
I
Manchester?
can imagine living here. Yeah, this is the greatest place to live. I mean, it's the freshest air, the best reflection, the best sunrise, the best mountain view. You know, it's a great place. It's like very unique. I hope not very many people discover it because it's got a nice charm. It's not overrun with people at the moment, and I think that's makes it pretty special.
Mhm. Good. Was there anything that you'd like to say to the listening audience about yourself, or to wind things up here? Was there anything else you'd like to share?
I think Manchester is in my blood. I mean, I think it probably influenced a lot of my sense of space. I think the fact that a lot of my buildings have large reflecting ponds in front of them, where you see the architecture sort of standing in its own reflection, probably has to do with, you know, growing up here on the bay and out there fishing and looking back at the town and seeing the buildings reflected in the sort of calm waters of the bay. So yeah, I think that there's a lot of Manchester in what I've done as an architect. You know, the sense of light and water and space. So I think that's an interesting dimension. I mean, this sort of tape being about Manchester, I think the fact that you grow up in a place, it gets in your blood, and it has a lot to do with what you end up doing. And I think that's been a very positive thing for me.
Okay, very good. Well, thank you very much. I really enjoyed speaking with you this afternoon, and I appreciate you taking your time to spend a few moments with us.
It's a great project. I wish you luck in it, because I think it's great to document the whole history of this place, this great place.
Okay, thank you.
I tend to give about 2 or 3 lectures a year, and usually invited and usually connected to something I'm doing. We were just down in Bogota on the 4th of May, where we're doing the doctorate building at the University of Bogota in Colombia. And I gave a lecture at 3:30 in the afternoon there at the university, and I was blown away because 1,500 people showed up for the talk. So it was really an honor and
Yes.
an amazing thing at 3:30 in the afternoon to have that many people come to one of my lectures. And I tend to try to narrow it down to 3 or 4 lectures a year in various different places. I gave at SciArc a lecture on the 2nd of March, and that was a full house. It was an honor. So you know, we published a lot in a lot of magazines, and a lot of our work has been on the internet and different websites. So that helps bring people to the lecture. And you know, I have a pretty strong philosophy that I speak about. You know, the phenomenology of architecture, the idea driving the design, and those themes in my talk really are part of my polemic as a teacher. So teaching at Columbia University for the last 20 years has also been a big part of my work as an architect.
Very good. Thank you very much.